Hi, everybody. My name is Mike, and today I'm joined with Dr. Donald Wallenfang, a theology professor at Walsh University, and we're going to be talking about his book, Human and Divine Being. You wrote this a couple years ago in 2017. What is it about, and who should read it?
For sure. Thanks so much for your interest, Mike. And this book, Human and Divine Being, published in 2017, had a long time of gestation, just like the cover of the book, an infant in the womb, thinking of this concept of gestation, this time of growing and development and incubation. And so this book came after, I think, at least 6 or 7 years of putting it together. And it began with just one essay I did in my doctoral studies toward the end on Edith Stein and her theological anthropology, that is asking, what is the human being in light of the question, who is God? Trying to understand ourselves as human beings in relation to who is God. It's the best way, I think, to go about anthropology, because otherwise it's incomplete. So I was really convinced when I read her work. I was really compelling, and for me, just revolutionary in her attentiveness to natural science in relation to metaphysics and phenomenology. And having this background and real affinity for the natural sciences, I just loved her work, fell in love with her work, and I wanted to study it more, and made a presentation on it at a conference, and then one thing led to another, and I felt moved to start to compose a book-length study on her work, her theological anthropology in particular.
So that's how you came up with the idea for it. How long did it take you to put it together?
Yes, it was years in the making, since the end of my doctoral studies, 2010, 2011, and then getting published then in 2017, so I guess 6 to 7 years of writing, a lot of days, just a page or two as a day's work, and just little by little chipping away, and finally you look back and you have some chapters, and then other scholars are reading the work, giving me feedback, and it took a lot of patience, because I would love to have seen it in print maybe some years before it actually came in print. But in the end, I think it's a lot better book with all of the feedback and critique I got, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out.
That's great, yeah. You had mentioned Edith Stein earlier. How did she influence your writing of the book?
For sure. My first encounter with Edith Stein, I think, happened when I was going to my Catholic school in St. Joseph, Michigan, and I was in probably 8th grade or so in theology class, and looking at different saints for confirmation names, getting ready to receive the sacrament of confirmation, and started to study a lot more about lives of saints. And even though I ended up choosing the name Francis Xavier after St. Francis Xavier, one of the original Jesuits and a great missionary, for my confirmation name, I do remember reading about Edith Stein's life, and similar to St. Maximilian Kolbe and others that died in the time of World War II, especially in the concentration camps, this was a time of history that really fascinated me. It seemed like a real dark time, for sure, the Holocaust. And it really just stopped me in my tracks, and to see these pictures of her face, always so pensive, always so serious, the young Edith Stein as a young adult studying philosophy. And what was very interesting to me about her life is that she was raised in a Jewish family, the rich Jewish heritage of faith, and then becomes atheist. And I could relate to it, even though in my own life I never became an outright atheist, lost total belief in God. We have faith because there's doubt nearby. And that she couldn't find enough evidence to believe in God for significant several years in her life into young adulthood, during her teenage years into young adulthood, but then ends up converting to the Catholic faith. I'm like, what is going on with this this fascinating woman, this fascinating story.
Yeah.
And in that she was so convinced by the truth revealed in Jesus in the end. And all the thinking she did, and all the seriousness and on the soberness of her thinking, she was convinced in the end about Jesus, all the way to her involuntary death in the concentration camp, both due to her Jewish identity, but also the fact that she was Catholic, because it was when she was in the Carmelite monastery in the Netherlands that the Dutch bishops spoke out against the Nazi movement, and in retaliation, all Catholics of Jewish ethnicity were rounded up and deported to Auschwitz, where she would die in a gas chamber there, August 9th, 1942. So her story itself, the magnitude of her story, just really captivated me, and I never forget it. And as I was working in the field of youth ministry in the Catholic Church, I would talk about her to different gatherings of youth, and she was always a real hero to me. So it was a natural move when I turned to her work late in my doctoral studies, and really it was because I got an opportunity to write a book review on the English translation. I think it came out in 2009 of her book called Potency and Act, an over 400-page, dense, philosophical, theological work that I just couldn't wait to read. I read every word of every page, wrote this review. It's still online somewhere, and that got me immersed in her writing and her way of thinking. And ever since then, I've loved it, and I felt eventually that I had to write a book on her work.
So some of you may know this, but others of you may not. Dr. Wallenfang is also a Carmelite. So how does that happen if you're married? How can you be a Carmelite, a member of the Carmelite community, and also be married and have a family?
Yeah, so the Carmelite as a religious order begins around the year 1200 with some of the soldiers who are in one of the Christian crusade armies trying to defend from invasion of Christians living in the Holy Land. And some of these men stay behind after the battles, and they're going back to Europe. Some of them stay behind on Mount Carmel. Okay. And Carmel means literally in Hebrew the Garden of God or Paradise of God. Wow. And it's a beautiful term. We read about Mount Carmel in the Hebrew scriptures, associated with Elijah the prophet, who was said, with zeal I have been zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. And so it's this zeal that causes him to witness to the truth in the face of great persecution. It's the zeal that makes him continue on his mission from God with determination. And so it's a monastic community that begins around the year 1200, and eventually it opens to women and then also to lay people.
Oh, and that's how you fit in. Okay.
Yeah, with the kind of third order. So both my wife Megan and I are members of the secular order of Discalced. Yeah, my wife too. She was actually the one that got the idea for us to look into this. And I love these Carmelite saints, and like we mentioned, Edith Stein, John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, Therese of Lisieux, people like this. They're all Discalced Carmelite saints. And the Discalced comes from in the 16th century. Teresa of Avila in Spain begins a reform order of the Carmelites. Okay. So today there's the OCARMs, the order of Carmelites, and then there's the OCD, not because they have obsessive compulsive disorder, but maybe they kind of do when it comes to things theological. But the OCD, the order of Discalced Carmelites. And Discalced is a word that means without shoes or shoeless. And it's not just a kind of a literal expression. I mean, at first, yes, they didn't wear shoes with the Reform because the Reform order was about moving toward more of this spiritual asceticism and penitential way of life,
Okay.
a very life of self-denial, and what's called mortification,
Right.
for the sake of union with God,
Okay.
and for the sake of the salvation of souls. So it's a very rich spiritual tradition, one that my wife and I are both drawn to, and we're going to be making our definitive promises this fall after 6 years of formation with the community, and we'll be fully professed Carmelites according to the evangelical counsels, living according to the spirit of the evangelical counsels, which are poverty, chastity, and obedience, the way of the life of Christ, and also according to the Teresian Carmel way of life. So we're very much looking forward to that.
Wow. All right, well, thank you very much to Dr. Donald Wallenfang for sharing a little bit about his book, Human and Divine Being. Now, if someone were interested in getting this book and purchasing it, where can they find it?
I think the cheapest price is on the publisher's website, Whitford Stock, and maybe we can put a link down below.
Put a link in the description.
And also it's available on Amazon and some other online vendors.
As well as finding a link to buy the book. Dr. Wallenfang had shared a lot about Edith Stein, so if you're interested in learning more about her, we will include some links in the description as well to more information about her. If you'd like, click on this link that will be popping up somewhere around here, or just watch for the next video because we'll be talking about his next book, The Dialectical Anatomy of the Eucharist. Thanks for joining us.